Greetings all, and welcome back to Unrepentant Geeking. I'm your host, Sean Cronefeld, and today we'll be beginning a multi-part series taking a look at a number of TV shows that recently concluded their seasons, including Jane the Virgin, The Flash, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and hopefully more. And as for the subject of today's episode, that is none other than CW's The Arrow. And oh, have I got a lot to say about this one. I'll also be tackling a much-delayed bonus review, courtesy of request via one of my loyal patrons. And if you want to get on the fun and force me to watch or play or listen to something absolutely horrible, or if you just want to see if I like what you like, be sure to head on over to my Patreon and see what you need to do to make that a reality. But enough of plugging my own stuff for now. Let's talk some TV.
We trusted you!
Not that I'm complaining, but shouldn't we be dead by now?
I saved your lives. I believe the words you're searching for are thank and you.
We could really use your help on this whole thing.
I'm sure Oliver's got this.
I wouldn't count on it.
He needs you guys, even if he doesn't think so.
I set in motion the death of your city. 4 instruments of death. And I doubt your friends will have time to stop all of them.
Oliver's in trouble.
It's one life against the city's.
The last thing you will ever see is your beloved city succumbing to disease and death.
No!
You were delivered by the prophecy. Your name is Al-Sahim.
My name is Oliver Queen.
Arrow Season 2 was a thing of beauty. While not without an occasional misstep here or there, overall it was a remarkably focused and well-executed season of television. It corrected most of the mistakes of the first season, while also moving the series and the world it existed in forward in a number of important ways. And thanks to terrific casting, it had a main villain in the form of Deathstroke, whose presence and drive helped keep the show on track even during some of its more convoluted plot developments. Again, Season 2 had its problems, not least of which being Laura Lance, but it's easy to forgive such things in the face of just how entertaining and engrossing the show was as a whole during it. Going into Season 3, there was every reason to be excited for another year of great live-action superhero entertainment. But unfortunately, it turns out that was not exactly in the cards. Instead, Arrow Season 3 was simply a mess, one often bogged down by a lack of a credible villain and poor storytelling choices in terms of the season-long arc. To be clear, I won't go so far as to say that this was a bad season of Arrow. Even at its worst, it never came close to, say, the lows of Gotham or the boring mediocrity of Constantine. Yet, at the same time, neither did it manage to come within spitting distance of, say, Daredevil, which presented a darker take on superheroes far more credible and engaging than Arrow, even at its best, has ever really managed, or The Flash, which I'll get more into later. Instead, what we got in Arrow Season 3 was a very uneven run that only got worse as the season progressed. The really sad part is, I actually think that the first half of the season was enjoyable, but once we got past the mid-season hiatus and began diving ever deeper into the League of Assassins story, well, things just started to fall apart. Leading the way in this regards was Matthew Nable's disastrously bland and lifeless portrayal of major DC baddie Ra's al Ghul. Maybe it's unfair to compare Nable to the likes of David Warner, who so memorably voiced the character in the seminal Batman the Animated Series, or Liam Neeson, but the fact remains that compared to those two stalwarts, Nable came across as the equivalent to amateur hour. Yet even judging Nable's take on Rage solely on its own merits, the man's performance still fell woefully short. Frankly, Nable was simply not up to the task of portraying one of the most dangerous yet charismatic villains to ever plague the DC universe. And this is especially a problem since so much of the last quarter or so of this season of Arrow required a figure who the audience could truly believe was Oliver's potential superior in every way. A man who could not just beat our hero physically, but one who could metaphorically reach into Oliver's soul and rip out all that was good and pure and worthwhile. Instead, in Nable, we got someone who often felt barely engaged with what was going on around him. And when combined with the lack of a proper definition for what this version of the League of Assassins mission and general way of operating really was, well, it just made for a muddled mess of a climax. For that matter, the writing in general during Arrow's last third wasn't really up to snuff. The whole plot with Oliver pretending to go Locutus of Borg doesn't particularly hold up in retrospect, nor was it all that entertaining in the moment either, thanks to the writers showing their hand way too early, and thus draining any tension out of the scenario. The supposed cliffhanger going into the finale was just embarrassing to have to endure. And while the resolution did bring in the Flash for a nice cameo, it also highlighted how technically with his help, Ollie could have wrapped up the whole damn problem weeks ago, in probably under 5 minutes. Again, that's always going to be an issue in a shared superhero universe where heroes with vastly different power levels exist, but good writing can make one suspend disbelief in this regards as long as what is happening is entertaining. And the League of Assassins storyline too often was anything but. Other issues include the show doing its damnedest to ruin the character of Felicity by turning her into little more than the simpering love interest, and the whole mess that is Malcolm Merlyn's continued presence on this show. Look, I get that the creators of Arrow love themselves some John Barrowman, and who could blame them? The man is joy and happiness given flesh, but even he can't save a show by his sheer presence alone. Miracle Day is proof enough of that. So if you want to keep him around after all the terrible nonsense he got up into in the first 2 seasons of Arrow, you really are going to have to work hard to justify it. And frankly, the writers of Arrow failed this city, as it were, in this regards. Malcolm was all over the map this season, in terms of both behavior and motivation, and the same was true for the way others reacted to him. The show never did a good enough job, in my opinion, to justify why, for large portions of the season, Ollie was just letting this mass murderer run free, and in his city no less. Yeah, you need his help, but why don't you get it while he's locked up, chained up, and unable to move? But nope, we're just gonna let him move about freely because we're idiots. I'm okay with where the character of Malcolm Merlyn ended up as the season came to a close, and I actually think it's a good place in terms of going forward for keeping him around in a at least semi-justifiable way, but man, do I not like the route the show took to get us there. Honestly, that would be my response to Arrow Season 3 in general. I like where all our various players are left as the season comes to an end, and especially Ollie and Felicity, but holy crap, did the writers not do the work to really earn that ending? They need to take a long, hard look at what did and didn't work this season, and learn from their goddamn mistakes if they're serious about keeping Arrow going for seasons more to come. Things need to change, and nowhere is this truer than in terms of the flashbacks that have become a real anchor around this show's neck. I'm not saying Arrow should get rid of the flashbacks altogether, but at the very least they need to no longer be a required part of every freaking episode. I don't know if having more screen time to play around with in the present would have made a difference in terms of the season's overall story arc, but I doubt it could have hurt. Too many times this season, an otherwise good episode was brought down by a pointless flashback sequence, and really you could have condensed that whole part of the story to 3 or 4 episodes max with little difficulty. It's especially frustrating to see Arrow drop the ball so often this season in light of how it actually managed to rehabilitate what had previously been its 2 biggest sources of weaknesses, namely the characters of Laurel and Mia. Indeed, their respective developments into full-fledged heroes are probably the season's most effective storylines, and the fact that by the last episode I didn't find it incredulous that Laurel can hold her own in combat is no small feat. As for Mia, well, she may just be my favorite character on the show at this point, or at least tied with Diggle, and I'm highly anticipating what kind of energy she'll bring to the show next season as a full-fledged member of Team Arrow. Speaking of Diggle, he also managed to make it through the season largely intact, and I would even say that I think the married life and fatherhood has only made him a more compelling figure. And with a masked identity of his own seemingly in the cards, hopefully he'll be allowed to be a more active participant going forward in a show that in seasons 2 and 3 haven't always known what to do with one of their best players. Overall, this was unquestionably an off-season for Arrow, but I remain hopeful things will improve. Unlike, say, Supernatural, I don't believe this show is even close to past its prime, nor do I believe that The Flash has made it irrelevant either. That being said, I think Arrow could learn something from its sister show, especially as far as tone is concerned. I don't need Season 4 of Arrow to be all puppy dogs and rainbows or anything, but I do think dialing a bit back on the angst and personal suffering for our heroes might be in order. There are ways to balance the show better. Look back at Batman the Animated Series for an example that, while embracing its darker aspects, did so without letting it drown in it either. I also think it's time for the show to move past its no superpowered villains rule as well, especially if they're really planning to tackle classic Teen Titans foe, the Hive. Damien Dark and his band of ne'er-do-wells could be exactly the kind of over-the-top baddies to inject a bit more comic book flavor and life into this series. Certainly the painfully self-serious Rage didn't work, so it only makes sense to go a different route, one with a bit more color and flair. At least Season 3 ended with the characters all more or less in a good place, and I'm excited to see where we pick things up next season. No doubt it won't be too long before Ollie is wielding a bow and arrow again, and as long as he's doing it with maybe an occasional smile on his face, I think things could still work out fine. The Taming of Adam, Part 1, The Path to Envale, by Jason Hubbard. Adam Taylor, college student, loner, and a young man who wants as little to do with the human race as he possibly can. And to that end, he's prepared to be as much of a jerk as it takes to drive others, especially family, away. He'll mock, he'll insult, he'll be cruel, and he'll outright ignore in order to be left alone. In short, Adam Taylor is your classic misanthrope. But there's one thing in life that Adam does enjoy. Magic. See, Adam lives in a world much like our own, but with one key difference. Magic is very real. It's been a part of society in Adam's world going back thousands of years, but all that's starting to change. Technology has finally reached the point where it can match, or even exceed, the greatest feats of magic. And best of all, anyone can use technology. Not so magic, which requires years of study and meditation, and even then, only those with the right talent can truly make use of the full range of what it can do. And that fact alone leaves many distrustful of magic, and there are growing rumblings cracking down on magic and those who use it. Of course, Adam doesn't really care about any of that. As far as he's concerned, the rest of the world can go to hell as long as it doesn't bother him personally. However, what Adam doesn't know is that he'll soon meet a man who will change the course of his life forever. A man who will drag Adam into a plot whose repercussions could have terrible consequences for the world at large, and Adam in particular. And so, now Adam Taylor is going to have to learn to care about something and someone other than himself, or else he may not be around much longer to care about anything at all. Such is the setup for The Taming of Adam, Part 1, The Path to Envale, an independently published urban fantasy novel from newcomer Jason Hubbard, and it's an interesting entry into the urban fantasy subgenre. These days, said subgenre is more crowded than ever, but Envale has little trouble standing out from the crowd for a number of reasons. First of all, there's the world itself. Certainly this isn't the first urban fantasy I've read where magic is a known and accepted part of everyday life, but I really like the twist on the concept Hubbard has made. By presenting a world where magic is increasingly falling out of favor, he gives things a unique feeling, and in general, the world is well realized. The same goes for Envale's take on magic, and which the book does a good job of laying out the specifics of, without ever turning into too much of an exposition fest. Still, the biggest strength of Envale is its characters, including, of course, its lead, Adam Taylor. Making someone as potentially unlikable as Adam is a real risk, but Hubbard manages to more often than not walk that fine line between someone being unlikable and yet still a compelling figure to follow. Furthermore, a big part of Envale is about Adam's growth as a person, and how he learns to actually place value on others, and having a role in society at large. It's a familiar arc to be sure, but well told all the same, and it helps make Adam a good choice to build a story around. Similarly, the book's nominal lead antagonist has more layers than one often sees in stories of this type, and his personal journey ends up going places I honestly didn't see coming. I had the character pegged one way, only for Hubbard to pull a fast one on me and take things in a completely different direction, and yet it all still made sense in terms of both the character in question and the larger story of the novel. Throw in a number of well-developed and fascinating supporting players, and you have a strong cast around which to build a plot. Overall, The Taming of Adam Part 1, The Path to Envale, somewhat awkward title aside, was a great read, and a good start for what will hopefully be a long-running series. In the interest of full disclosure, writer Jason Hubbard is a patron of mine, and did request I give his book a read, but I want to be clear that he had no influence on my final opinion of his work. We agreed I would call it as I saw it, and that's exactly what I have done. It just so happens that I rather enjoyed Envale, to the point that I've already purchased the just-released second entry in the series, The Hunter's Sign, and am at around the halfway point of the story as of this recording. If anything, I think this second book in the Taming of Adam series is even better than the first, as it continues to unfurl the life and times of Adam Taylor. So, if all this sounds interesting to you, and I hope it does, be sure to check out the book via Amazon down at the link below. You can get it digitally for under $5, and the same goes for the sequel as well, so it's not like it's going to take a huge investment to give the series a try. Is The Path to Invale a groundbreaking piece of fiction that completely redefines its subgenre forever? No, but it is a well-written slice of independent urban fantasy that fans of these types of stories should find easy to enjoy. And that's going to do it for this episode of Unrepentant Geeking. I hope you all enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed making it. And again, if you want to see me review something you're interested in, be it book, TV show, comic book, video game, whatever, then go check out my Patreon and see what you have to do to make that a reality. Next time, I'll be taking a look at the completed first seasons of freshman CW series Jane the Virgin and The Flash. Until then, everybody, for Channel Awesome and Unrepentant Geeking, I'm Sean Cronenfeld, wishing you all long days and pleasant nights.